Hey guys, welcome back to Clownfish TV. This is Kneon. I'm here with Geeky Sparkles.
Hello.
And oh my god, we're gonna do a Star Wars hate video. Oh my god, that's all you talk about.
Even if
Star
you pause
Wars.
it, you still hate it.
So this is interesting. This is very interesting. You sent me this information that Kathleen Kennedy seems to be, I don't know, fighting to save her job.
No, this whole thing is damage.
No,
I think this is about the new movie. It's damage control is what it is. And now they're using, because a lot of the fans are like, George, you guys screwed George Lucas over. So now that the narrative is, George is my BFF and George loves it because, George appreciates everything we've done. And George, splitting the fandom, I'm sure he loves that. George loves it because he's my friend and George put me here. I'm only in charge because George Lucas said so.
This is all because the fans have been very vocal about George Lucas's involvement or lack of involvement in the sequel trilogy, because we all know the story, and we're going to talk a little more about that later. The truth of what happened. Basically, Disney hosed George Lucas. He sold the company to them, believing that they were going to produce his versions of 7, 8, 9.
He spent the time doing the treatments.
Yes.
Why would he think that unless he really had reason to think that?
Right. And Bob Iger sort of, he said before in his book that he was sorry he gave George Lucas the wrong impression. So George had a treatment for 7, 8, 9. Disney promptly threw it in the garbage, put out their version of The Force Awakens, of the sequel trilogy, and then George Lucas was so hurt he referred to them as white slavers, that he basically sold his children into prostitution. Mm-hmm. And that's how wounded he was.
Well, here's the thing, though. But now, the way they're spinning it now is Kathleen Kennedy, they keep bringing it up that George put her in charge. George is the one who put her in charge. George is the one. But and that's true. I guess he's the one. It's supposedly his suggestion that she be the one that runs it, because they've been friends for years, which we know that they've worked together for years. That is true. But I think I get the vibe that he thought that she was going to go along with what he said too.
Yeah, then that could have been the case. It could have been that George and, look, I'm not defending Kathleen Kennedy, but it could have been the case that George and Kathleen were like, let's do this thing. And then as soon as she started working for Bob Iger and not for George Lucas, the deal changed.
Mm-hmm. Pray they don't alter it any further.
Well,
they're going to. They've done it all many times.
But look at this. They got like, what, 6 articles? They got 6 articles out of this on Comic Book.
Oh, yeah.
One
this
interview.
is one thing they keep doing on these blogs. There is one interview, and they break it up into all these different articles. It's funny as heck.
So yeah, Rolling Stone does that, and then these blogs do like 6 or 8 articles. So we're going to talk about that, and then we're going to talk about how the deal was altered, and what the deal is with Kathleen Kennedy, who has been mostly silent for the last couple months since Celebration. She hasn't really said much. Now she's kind of coming out and...
Oh, and just for good measure, can we put in the thing about the person getting mad about the horses on a spaceship?
We'll talk about horses on a spaceship.
I just got to put that in there because it's so funny. Anyway, go ahead.
We'll talk about horses on a spaceship. So before we get into the video, please subscribe if you guys have not yet. We're at 75,000 subs, hoping for 100,000 soon. All right, so I don't know if it originated with YouTube or what the deal is here, but CNET, yesterday we had a friend send this to us, that they wrote an entire article about the Rise of Skywalker space horses.
Yes, because people like us keep calling it space horses. They're not space horses. They're not even horses. Yeah, we know. We're not stupid. We know. It's just a joke that we're like, they're going to go with space horses. It was a joke, but unfortunately, people have no sense of humor because you're not allowed to have sense of humor anymore.
You're not allowed to. Either that, or they knew that the space horse meme has sort of taken on a life of its own, and they want to cash in on that.
Right.
On space horses.
So they're talking about the space horses because how dare we? And I was going to read it. It said about this. They pops for 25 seconds in the 37 clip. Don't blink or they'll gallop out of frame. So don't blink or you'll miss it, and they're getting mad about it. And they look like brown and black horses. We're talking about the ones on the Star Destroyer, honey. They're like horses. They gallop like horses. But thanks to the Vanity Fair spread in May, we know they're Orbaks or Orboks. Yeah, we know. Thanks to whatever. Yeah, we know. So you're just dumb. You're not space horses. It's a slangy way to identify them, but they're physically different from horses. They're bigger.
They're bigger.
They're bigger. Their claw is no size. They're covered in long, shaggy dogs in winter style fur. They're not horses. They're not horses. They look like horses. I'm sorry.
They're the horses from Thundar the Barbarian is what they are.
So, you know what? In our response to this, you can show them the response to this that was our response.
They're called Orbaks, horses on the spaceship.
Yeah, because, everybody's, I can't tell you, but people were like, they're not in space. No, they're not real horses, so they could be able to breathe up there, possibly, but people can't.
All right, so Kathleen Kennedy, who apparently oversaw the horses on a spaceship, she said that Lucasfilm president Kathleen Kennedy noted that comments were inspired more by the difficulties of handling... They're trying to apologize for George Lucas. George Lucas called Disney white slavers because he felt like he had sold his children into prostitution.
But he did call Iger after and said he was sorry for saying it.
That's according to Iger.
Yeah, that is according to Iger.
Because Iger put this book out, and actually the book was more damning than, because it actually makes Disney look worse. Because before it was just like, oh, he's a little butthurt, whatever. But then you kind of see how Iger kind of saddled up to him and sold him on how it was good. Well, kind of like Walt Disney did with Mary Poppins.
But
I'm just gonna say.
But it's funny because like he went to all this trouble writing these treatments and everything else before. I guess it went on for months that he wasn't interested in, and then he wrote treatments from this time and everything. Why would he do that unless he thought? Why waste the time?
Because I think there was a gentleman's agreement that went south. So Kathleen Kennedy noted the comments were inspired more by the difficulties of handing his creation over to anyone else, regardless of the direction that creation was taken. No. He was told specifically. I think
that could be, but it is hard to hand your creation over. I mean, that's completely true. But I can't see him going to all that trouble unless he thought there was a reason for it.
Yeah, so they're already being like, well, George Lucas handed over directorial duties to other filmmakers for Empire and Jedi.
But he oversaw it.
He oversaw it, and it was his basic story. They even say story by George Lucas. Kathleen Kennedy. I think there's plenty of examples where people create something that's fundamental to who they are, where it's difficult letting go and watching that become something different. So Kathleen Kennedy, president of Lucasfilm, is admitting that Star Wars has become something different than what it originally was under George Lucas.
Obviously.
It's turned into space opera for wine moms under a brand, a lifestyle brand.
That's what they're trying to... That's what they're marketing it as.
They're marketing as a lifestyle brand. Disney has turned it into something fundamentally different. Kathleen shared with Rolling Stone. So I think initially it was difficult for George. I don't know. He didn't look very happy in those Galaxy's Edge pictures. No,
he doesn't. He never
with
looks
Bob Iger, like he
Bob
hates
Iger.
that guy. I don't think he anticipated how hard it would be. And J.J. Abrams came in with such enthusiasm and frankly reverence for Star Wars and George.
Well, yeah, in the first movie, I think he kind of did though, because my complaint was it was too similar to the original trilogy. But I understand why they did it that way. I really understand the reasoning. I was just like, what the heck? But, so yeah, I'm sure he liked that one because they came in and they're similar. But George's thing was he was about, where's the new stuff? Where are you pushing the envelope? Yeah. Where's all, you didn't really get that with, the film.
So he may not agree with every choice that JJ made. He may not agree with every choice Rian Johnson made, but he appreciates the filmmaking. He appreciates that they showed up and...
Yeah, I love this. That I know. And he so appreciates, for instance, what Industrial Light and Magic did, I'm sure he did, has done with the work in these movies. I mean, that's a company he created. He just continually tells me how astounded he is by how far things have come now. That I believe, actually. If it's about ILM,
yeah, I
believe he did, because ILM didn't do a bad job.
No, because literally anything you can think of now they can put on film, and that was one thing he always pushed for.
Yeah.
But I can imagine this conversation's like, well, Kathy, these movies are shit. And Kathy's like, but George, they're a polished turd. He's like, yeah, they look good.
Well, here, no. You missed the most important part, though.
I missed the most important part.
This is important part. Kathleen pointed out that thanks to the decades of friendship she shares with Lucas, she knows that he appreciates what the new films have accomplished.
Even if he was disappointed to see his ideas left
So behind. He appreciates it. He hates it, but he appreciates it. So appreciates the fandom split.
Yeah, he came down. I'm sure he's watching this, eating popcorn. Watching now, this is where it gets really dubious. I'm going to talk about what went down with Disney, because I did read through that, and it sounds kind of, I'm going to say it sounds kind of skeezy how they talked him into it. It really does. She added he came down, for instance, on The Mandalorian to see what we were doing. It doesn't mean he approved. He just came down to see what we were doing.
Well, no, he says that he was, he knows Dave Filoni.
He does know Dave Filoni, yes.
And he said he was a kid in that set, watch what we were doing. I'm sure he was. I mean, I'm sure he was excited to be on the set of it, because it does feel very Star Wars. I'm sure he did appreciate that.
Yeah, but again, they kind of spent like, well, George gave his stamp of approval just because he popped his head in and see like, hey, what are you guys doing?
Well, he's my friend. George hates it, but he's my friend, so I talk to him all the time, and I know, and I'm telling you what he really thinks because he's my friend.
Yeah, because the fandom's running with this. And again, but then we go right from that to she's unsure how long she's going to stay. I think I think she's on her way out. I really do. And I think and we've said before, I think she's going to leave with Bob Iger when Bob Iger leaves. They're not going to fire her publicly. They would never.
No, she's going to leave on her own terms. We've said that for a while now.
Yeah. So what they're doing is they're cutting back on the films, on the film schedule, and she's going to leave on her, and they're with her head held high and be like, well, my time is come at Lucasfilm. I'm going to hand it over to whoever's next in the next era of Star Wars, and they're going to make a big deal about it, and it's going to be this big flowery send-off. But the reality is Star Wars failed on her watch, and they're not going to address that.
Right, they're not.
That's you know, she's talking like it's past tense. I've really enjoyed it. I have to say, it's been exciting. What happens in the future, and how long and how much longer do I do this? I don't know. I'm looking at all of that.
I don't know. Disney has to tell me.
Disney has to tell me. She's gone. She's gonna be gone. She's gonna be gone. Now here's where it's interesting. This is the lurid, true Disney Star Wars story. Finally, this book has done more damage to Star Wars. This book should not have been published until after Bob Iger was out of his CEO position at Disney, because it does not do them any favors. It actually makes Disney look worse in regards to Star Wars. I mean, before you could just kind of like, oh, George is just grumpy. But when Bob Iger talks about the story, it sounds like he really pushed George Lucas and gave him, well, false promises, lies, however you want to candy coat that.
He led him to believe things that he knew weren't true.
Yeah, so in Bob Iger's tell-all biography, Ride of a Lifetime, it shines a unique and unprecedented light behind the scenes. This increasingly stormy context makes his reflection all the more intriguing and worth examining in detail. So, yeah.
Examining? Is that what it said?
Examining. I can't read. It's examining.
Examining? I'm like, that's a new word. I'm like, I never heard that.
Examining is when you really, really examine something up close.
I'm examining it.
To the point of being uncomfortable. Kind of like a doctor's visit. I've come in for my examination.
You examinated me.
He examinated me. He examinated my anus, and I felt really awkward.
Anyway, continue.
Here, how Bob Iger persuaded George Lucas to sell Star Wars. So basically, Lucas was led to, as I understand it, Lucas was led to believe that this was going to go down like Pixar, where they were going to sell it, but he still was going to have input. That's what happened with Pixar.
Yeah, he wanted the Pixar deal. That's what they keep saying.
The Pixar deal, yeah. So Disney execs drew up a list of further acquisition targets. How cold does this sound? Can you imagine Walt Disney?
This sounds exactly like Bob Iger. That's how he refers to things as. It's no longer about being creative and making new things and you know, telling new stories. It's about what can we acquire, what can we assimilate.
We're not creative enough here at Disney anymore to come up with new things, so we have to just assimilate other people's.
Iger is a Borg.
He's the Borg. He's the Borg Queen. He's the Borg Queen.
Anyway.
So he had a list of acquisition targets they believed could help the House of Mouse continue to grow, and two companies that were at the top of the list were Marvel and Lucasfilm. They initially prioritized Marvel in large part because they believed it would be hard to convince George Lucas to relinquish control of Star Wars. In 2011, Steve Jobs, who was in the late stages of cancer by then, decided to intervene. Let's blame Steve Jobs. Decided to intervene and encourage Iger to give Lucas a call. Again, Iger's very chummy with the people at Apple. He was on the board when Apple TV was being developed. That's
at the same time as Disney Plus, which is, you know, whatever.
Very weird, very weird. So Iger was determined to handle negotiations in a respectful manner. He didn't push the issue. I don't believe that. An opportunity finally arrived in May 2011 when Iger reopened the Star Tours attraction in Disney World and Disneyland after a year-long refurbishment, which I love. I love the new Star Tours. He arranged to have breakfast with Lucas and fired the question to him straight. According to Iger, it went something like this: I don't want to be fatalistic, George, and please stop me if you would rather not have this conversation, but I think it's worth putting this on the table. What happens down the road? You don't have any heirs who are going to run the company for you. They may control it, but they're not going to run it. Shouldn't you determine who protects or carries on your legacy?
Basically, we're trying to spin it that George handed it over to us because he believed in us, and now, so when you're mad about our movies not doing well, you're just mad at George Lucas.
Yeah, it turned out
it's always George's fault.
God. So Lucas agreed, noted Disney was the only company he'd ever considered selling it to. Turned out he'd been talking to Steve Jobs, who told him all about the way Disney handled Pixar. But that breakfast turned out to be just the beginning of a long, drawn-out process. Lucas was indecisive and conflicted about selling his company. Iger refused to push him. I don't believe that. Okay, so I won't read the entire article here, but they do talk about how Kathleen Kennedy was hired on George Lucas's watch, but it does sound to me like George Lucas was led to, he was led by, Steve Jobs too. He was led to believe that Disney was going to do right by him, and they didn't.
Disney was going to give him the money, but let him still,
control it. And that's
he was
not
still
how they
going to
work.
have a say in what happened, and he was going to, because he is Star Wars is him, and he was going to have a say in it and be allowed to help control what happens with it. And he might have thought that might have been what he was led to believe. That's probably why he said Kathleen.
Yeah, because he had worked with her. I mean, for all that, look.
She was at Lucasfilm, wasn't she?
Yeah.
At the time? So he probably was, friends with her and figured, well, that way, we could Kathleen in there. It's a win-win for everybody, and we could work together.
But Bob Iger throws shade at Kathleen Kennedy in the book. Mm-hmm. He basically said he was surprised that the last thing George Lucas did was put Kathleen Kennedy in charge.
He's blaming it on Kathleen Kennedy.
Yes.
He's then blaming it on George.
Yes. As Iger reflects, this was one last way for George to put someone in whom he trusted to be the steward of his legacy. So Bob Iger is deflecting. It's very possible, because you have to remember, Kathleen Kennedy, for all her faults, did work on movies like E.T., Jurassic Park, pretty much every Spielberg project in the 80s. I mean, she does have a good sense of 80s movies, and she worked on a lot of these movies. It is completely possible that there's a blame game going on at Disney right now, where Iger's blaming Kennedy, Kennedy's blaming Iger.
No, well, this whole thing seems
now
to me...
Now they're blaming George.
This whole thing seems to me is, hey, the new movie's coming out in like a month from today. So we need to get people at the movie theater. So when all you're whining and complaining about what we did to George Lucas agreed to it. George Lucas is the one who picked Kathleen Kennedy. I know you all hate her, but it's George's fault. So at the end of the day, everything's George's fault. So if you like Star Wars, you like George Lucas, then you have to like these movies, so go see it.
It's also worth noting that Cats comes out on the exact same day. Mm-hmm. And I'm waiting for hashtag Cats Army. I'm waiting for people to go buy. I'm waiting for people to go buy tickets to Cats, and then take a picture of their ticket to Cats in front of the poster for the Rise of Skywalker. There needs to be a Cats Army, so people go see Cats instead of the Rise of Skywalker. Speak with your wallets. So
at the end of the day, all these articles from this one interview that all these different sites are doing is this because they're all like, it's George's fault. So stop saying these movies suck and George Lucas doesn't like them because it's his fault. He put Kathleen in there. So go see the movie because, you have to.
It's George's fault, even though we took his treatments and threw them in the garbage can as soon as we could. Mm-hmm. And George has been very vocal about not liking our treatment of Star Wars. Gotta blame George.
But even Kathleen, well, he's my friend and he doesn't like everything we did, but he appreciates everything we did. Go see the movie.
Here's an idea, media. Do an interview with George Lucas. But you're probably after that disastrous interview where he called, because there was I guess I read someplace else there was a non-disparagement clause, mm-hmm. and that was part of the issue. Like, they've shut him up pretty quick because he wasn't allowed to say. I don't think he's allowed to be honest. But Bob Iger can put a book out there. Right.
Yeah. I don't know. It's probably true. And I'm interested to see what the actors have to say afterwards, because there's a lot of actors who are just itching to have words.
Well, Mark Hamill is been dropping some truth bombs over the last couple of years, but I think he also has a non-disparagement clause.
And John Boyega has been making comments that and I don't blame John Boyega because they really screwed Finn over. And there was one article I saw when you were scrolling through saying they're making him less comedic in this one.
Yeah.
He's not going to be the funny black sidekick.
Like in every movie.
It's a woman and the funny black sidekick. It's
always a white woman and a funny black male sidekick. Yep. Always. Mm-hmm. Always. Because that's what people want. All right, so we're going to wrap this one up.
Yeah, we're all over the place on this one.
We were. But this is basically,
where you were going with
this is a damage control. This is the damage control episode.
Long and short of it, too late, it's damage control.
Yeah.
That's what this is all about.
Yeah, so at least they know that George Lucas was disappointed. They know the fans are disappointed. At this point, though, I think it's too late to fix anything. I think it's done. Like, put a fork in it. And now the future of Star Wars is television, which is sad.
Well, it is. And I mean, and they're basically trying to say, don't blame Kathleen Kennedy, blame George because he's the one who put her in charge.
Yep. So this is damage control. Damage control. All right, so we're going to wrap this up. Please subscribe for more pop culture news, views, and rants here on Clownfish TV.
Bye.
Goodbye. Hey guys, thanks for watching Clownfish TV. Please consider supporting the channel. Go to clownfishsupport.com. That's clownfishsupport.com. And if you want to join our community, go to clownfishtalk.com. That's clownfishtalk.com. Please subscribe, ring the bell for notifications. We will talk to you next time.